Good afternoon. How are you all doing after lunch? Everybody fine? Snoozing gently? Just going to have a small moment of technical change here. The thing you need to know is that actually we were given a brief on reimagining teaching for the 21st century, and I think it's going to be interesting, the different things that we're all saying. And I know Stephen and I didn't talk before today, and there's a lot of similarities, I think, and shared, I think, frustration to some extent that we're all going to be talking about. How are you doing? Do we need Mike? This is Mike's computer. I think you need to log in.
Password, right. That's my password. And then there we go. Should just be able to press that button. Then there you go. That should do it.
Happy?
There we go, it's coming. There you go.
Thanks, Mike.
You there? Yep.
Okay. Okay, so in this paper, in this session, I want to talk about how we might go about reimagining teaching in the 21st century. I want to do three things. First, I want to do what I was briefed to do, which is talk about some of the ways in which I might reimagine education in the context of some major technological developments. Second, I want to talk about some of the general trends in how the future of teaching is being talked about in the public sphere and in wider debates. But finally, I want to talk about some of the holy cows in this debate, some of the unspoken assumptions that tend to structure any public discussion. And because this is quite a lot to do in 20 minutes, I've decided to do something I haven't done for a very long time, which is actually write a paper and see if I can sustain a flow of argument rather than just a set of bullet points. So, reimagining the future of teaching. On the basis of what seems to be pretty shared consensus in the technology field, we can see a few key trends that are likely to be of significance in shaping the future of teaching over the next 25 years. First, we're looking at the shift towards ubiquitous and pervasive computing infrastructure, the development of the capacity to bring massive computing power to bear on any problem and issue we might consider relevant, the development of an increasingly mixed reality as object spaces and buildings are tagged and augmented, mixing virtual and physical like never before, the capacity to create immersive experiences which could potentially transport us to new times, spaces, and places. And then it starts getting really interesting. The development of new interfaces between brain and body and the merging of biology and computing in ways which challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. And the development of increasingly complex systems of systems that will challenge human intelligence to comprehend, let alone manage and control. Now, these trends provide massive challenges in our understanding of what it means to be a teacher. They challenge our understanding of what knowledge means and what it is that education will need to teach. They challenge our understanding of what the individual unit of education should be. Are we talking about a learner plus technology, or a learner plus a technology and network of collaborators? They challenge our understanding of the tools and resources we'll be able to bring to bear to solve education's problems, and our understanding of where learning could happen and who could be mobilized to support it. They also bring with them, and I am always astonished at technology conferences that this doesn't get raised, significant environmental and ethical challenges. What will be the material and energy costs associated with these developments, and to what extent will these tools and resources actually be used to support human flourishing rather than simple economic competitiveness? And so if I were going to be producing a scenario of 21st century, I'd produce a picture of education that is fundamentally different from the type of education we know now. It would show learners and educators working together on real problems that are meaningful to both them and to their communities. It would show different types of people involved in education, drawing upon the expertise of diverse communities. It would comprise an environment in which learning was characterized by the ability to enter into and move between different knowledge communities. It would show a very different assessment system, and finally, it would also show a system where the ethical and environmental challenges posed by technological development were consciously and thoughtfully examined in the education sector. Now, in terms of our brief, that's what I was supposed to elaborate on for about 15 minutes, but I'm reluctant to do this for some of the same reasons that Stephen was. And the reason is that I've been talking about future visions for the last 10 years, and many people in this room have been talking about them for much longer, and we still don't see significant change in educational practice today. And this was brought home to me when I read this paragraph. Change, constant, accelerating, ubiquitous, is the most striking characteristic of the world we live in, and our education system has not yet recognized this fact. The abilities and attitudes required to deal adequately with change are those of the highest priority, and it is not beyond our ingenuity to design school environments which can help young people to master concepts necessary to survival in a changing world. Now, this quotation was written not this year, not 10 years ago, but nearly 40 years ago by Neil Postman and Charles Weingarter in a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. And for those of you who haven't read it, or for those of you who have but forgotten, I think it's probably time to rediscover it. So despite the many years we spent arguing for a new sort of teaching, today we still have an information-obsessed education system designed around individual attainment. So the question I think we need to address this afternoon is not really just what future visions, but what is it that keeps education systems fundamentally unchanging in their interpersonal relationships and organization? I don't think it's enough simply to berate education for looking the same now as it did 100 years ago. Instead, we need to understand what gets in the way of change. And this is not just about technophobia or simple inertia. It's about the unexamined assumptions about what education is for and how it's organized. Now, to elaborate this, what I want to do is take a look through the sorts of assumptions that underpin popular debates on the future of education. And I want to do this by looking at how Google, showing my age, constructs the public debate in this area. So what happens when you Google teaching in the 21st century? What are the top 10 that you get, or the top 30? You get websites offering gateways to 21st century skills. You get the Scottish Government's agreement on pay, conditions and development for teachers. You get the digital classroom edition. You get a number of teachers' blogs, and you get reports on international studies. Now, what I want to do is I had a look at the first 20 to 30 sites and pulled out a set of kind of 5 key debates. And I want to talk you through those, and then I want to talk about what's not discussed. So the first big debate, the obvious one, the thing that brings us all together, is the debate on the ideas about the relationship between teaching and ICTs. At least 3/4 of our discussions about teaching in the 21st century are about how to deal with technology. But what's interesting is that when we're talking about the future of teaching, we're not just talking about the future of technology. The second big debate is around 21st century skills and sort of skills that we should be teaching. Now, what was interesting was that there's a quote from Alvin Toffler that comes up on 2 different websites, and the quote runs, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And this quote appears alongside teaching materials and resources. Interestingly, none of the sites using this quotation, promoting 21st century skills, cite the origin of the quotation. It's become completely disconnected from its source document, and it now flies around the web as a rationale for massive change. It would be good to see advocates of 21st century skills practicing what they preach by actually showing some basic good practice in referencing. I tracked over 50 pages that used this quotation. Not one of them gave a source for it. So one of the things that I say about this is beware random quotations and beware gurus. The third debate is around what knowledge should be valued, what should count as truth in education. If you look at these top 20 sites, there's one that's dedicated to a set of resources designed to help science teachers challenge creationist and intelligent design beliefs. This suggests that teachers are going to be operating in a very complex knowledge environment in the 21st century. It makes visible the fact that there are competing beliefs over what counts as truth. And the debate is over the teacher's role in maintaining the boundaries between these different sorts of knowledge. And this representation of a teacher as boundary maintainer comes up when you look at the teachers' blogs as well. Because the teachers' blogs, people are discussing, should they be teaching grammar or creativity? So the big debate here is nothing less than what counts as truth and knowledge, and what role a teacher should play in maintaining this. Which brings us to another big debate in this area. For example, 2 of the sites that we were looking at reference the 3rd International Mathematics and Science Study. And they suggest that there is contention over how student data should be used to assess individual teachers and school performance. What could or should be assessed? What is the relationship between teaching and accountability? And this area of debate foregrounds the fact that developments in ICTs have arguably had most impact in education precisely in the area of generating massive amounts of standardized data about students, and thereby making it possible for students, teachers, schools, and countries to be compared, assessed, audited, and held accountable. And this whole accountability and assessment regime is underpinned by this fundamental change in information about students. And at these ICT conferences, we very rarely talk about this activity, and yet it's led to a fundamental change in practice. And the final debate is over the teacher's professional identity. And as I said, 2 of the top sites were about negotiations over pay and conditions, professional development and training. But we're also seeing blogs that are produced by teachers where the teachers are debating their personal motivations and aspirations to make a real difference to students. So these different sites showcase the debate that teachers are also having within the profession around the type of relationship they should be building with their students, whether teachers are functionaries or visionaries, whether teachers are there to engage emotions or to ensure attainment of standards. So from this rapid Google survey, what are the key areas of public debate for the future of teaching? And it seems there's 5 big ones going on: around the role of technology, around the type of new skills, around the question of who acts as arbiter of knowledge, around the question of how education should be assessed and made accountable, and around teacher professional identity. And some of these, though not all, are likely to be the subject of debate at this conference. More interesting, however, is what the sites don't say, what is taken for granted so completely that no one is arguing for or against it, what is seen as so implicit that it doesn't need to be advocated for or challenged. What are the holy cows that aren't even considered up for debate in the public sphere around the future of teaching? And in this snapshot, I'd say the following issues are so taken for granted they aren't even up for discussion. The first is that teaching and education is primarily about teaching children. None of the debates at the moment are recognizing any possibility of demographic change. Lifelong learning arguments are more or less absent and part of a different agenda. And the possibility of a fundamental shift in formal education to be education for multiple age groups isn't even acknowledged in any of these debates. Second, there is the assumption that teaching is done only by adults and only by trained professional teachers. There are still fundamental resistances to taking young people seriously as social actors. There's no challenge to the traditional relationship between adults and children, and there is no acknowledgement of the expertise and knowledge that resides outside school. The third thing that is taken for granted is that schools are and will remain the fundamental organisational unit of education. The possibility of accessing information and knowledge in diverse locations isn't discussed. Fourth, in all of these debates, the individual learner remains the fundamental unit of education. While there's reference to things like teamworking and collaboration, there's no examination of what we need to know and how we need to know. It might change if you take the network rather than the individual as the basic premise. And finally, economic competitiveness is assumed as an unproblematic goal for education. There is limited discussion of the role of education in developing personal attributes, community identity, environmental sustainability, and there's a very limited conception of global citizenship. Now, what are the implications of that public debate? Because all of what we're doing here is located in that public debate. All of the things that we are thinking about enter into this world of common sense and taken for granted assumptions about what education is. I think the implications are that there are significant limits placed on how we tend to reimagine education. It means that some ideas are likely to be more successful than others. For example, I will lay money on ideas coming to fruition in the next 2 years that are about appropriating digital technologies to help young people achieve economically beneficial skills which can be easily assessed in ways that allow comparison between children, schools, and states. But if we're interested in more significant change than this, if we're interested in educational change that recognizes young people's social agency, if we're interested in educational change that acknowledges that the way we manage knowledge in the 19th and 20th centuries will need to change, If we're interested in educational change that is able to draw on the talents of society as a whole, when economically, environmentally, and demographically things are likely to get tight in the next 25 years, then we're going to need to challenge these underlying assumptions. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in is asking the following questions. What is really the new relationship between adults and children? What is the intergenerational contract if we take seriously children's agency and expertise? It's not just about being excited that kids can use computers. How does it fundamentally change the relationships between adults and children that are set up in schools? Secondly, what is the distinctive role of professional teachers and educators as opposed to individuals and communities and websites and networks who are able to share other forms of knowledge? We need to start understanding and making the case for the educational specialist in a way that we haven't yet. What really is the role of the school? And I have to say, I'm not a de-schooler, but there are many who are. What is the role of the school as opposed to the home and community as a learning organisation? And finally, what is the role of education in relation not only to economic, but also to personal social goals? And are these goals compatible? I think we need to tackle some of these questions. I don't think we can assume we all mean the same thing when we talk about the 21st century or 21st century skills. And I think it's only by being quite honest that we are asking some fairly fundamental questions about the structure of organisation that we will be able to build a new and fundamentally more challenging debate on the shape of education over the next 25 years. Thank you.